Hey everyone, and welcome to a roundup discussion we're doing of all the League of Legends news from this week. Maybe some of it, I don't know. We're going to figure it out. My name is Travis Gafford. I do League of Legends esports content, interviews, all sorts of different things, and I am joined by, well, the first person I'm going to introduce. You guys probably know him from Spellsy's Super Stats show. It's a spectacular production put on, I believe, every week, sometimes not every week, odd occasion, by Spellsy himself. Spellsy used to play League of Legends competitively, I'm told. I think there was a Leaguepedia article about you or something. Do you have anything that you want to add to the resume?
Yes, and I do stats content on onGamers.
Yeah. I believe you used to play Poppy a lot, is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
The all Poppy.
Yes, all Poppy top.
Yeah.
That was the secret.
Additionally, I am joined by Hunter, who he claims his last name is Leigh. I actually believe it's Leigh.
No.
There's a big debate that goes on about
it's
this.
not that big.
He is one of the big movers and shakers at onGamers. He helps grease the wheels, make sure everything is happening.
Wheel greaser.
And this is his camera debut because...
That's true. You can find me in the background of GameSpot news updates and videos like that.
Whenever people complain about problems with the site, I literally tell them to contact him on Twitter.
It's true.
So.
I ignore you on Twitter regularly.
Yeah, that is it. Yeah, he cares about the fans. Either way, let's get into some interesting news that came out just yesterday. CLG is actually going to have their whole starting lineup go to Korea to live with Monte Cristo in his, monastery somewhere. His Monty's monastery, I believe that's what it's called.
Yeah.
And
they're all going to live together.
Yes. And Lord knows this worked out so well for CLG the last time they went to Korea and lived together.
Right.
So they're going to do this to try and prepare for playoffs, of course, bringing in some jobbers for the sub-team, Hotshot, Chaos, some other folks in the end, and two people no one's really ever heard of. Spellsy, I want to know your immediate reaction when you heard about this.
So I first didn't believe that it was actually when I first heard, I was very confused. I couldn't believe that they were actually doing that. I heard rumors of Seraph going back, but I didn't believe that all 5 of them would all go back to Korea. That would be such an outlandish thing to do.
Yeah.
That's never happened ever in all of LCS. The closest thing is Gambit having 4 subs or something.
And that was accidental at best.
Yeah.
An intentional sort of scrubbing of 1 week's worth of action to move around the world. It's unprecedented.
Yeah.
It's hard to even put that in context. It does seem surreal.
And we should mention, of course, that the beginning part of the story, the first puzzle piece, was that Seraph, it was hinted at on Seraph's stream by the man himself, that he would have to be returning to Korea quite soon in order to handle his visa stuff.
Yeah.
So he was probably going to be gone from this weekend.
Right. So, when I get the benefit of keeping everybody together and training hard. This is the ultimate, risky proposition. Monte Cristo is a genius if this works, right? And maybe other teams follow him, and he's an idiot if it fails. That's the sort of... It's a major gambit, and CLG, this is right up their alley, right? A risk that seems more outlandish than anybody else is willing to take, that historically doesn't necessarily pay off very well.
Yeah.
Is this different? I don't know, but it's it's perfect CLG.
Now, I was getting tweets from people, and there were some comments flying around that CLG was not taking this seriously, that it was unsportsmanlike to just decide to not play the last week. A lot of people suggest that Riot is probably very upset about this, so apparently Riot has approved it. I don't know, what do you guys think, that there's any truth to any of that, or is this completely within their rights and it's completely fair and nice of them to do?
I mean, I think there's a little bit of disrespect. I think that they're just being oh, this LCS game is so useless that we shouldn't even show up. We should instead, NA doesn't really matter, we should instead go to Korea. But I think that at its heart, it was definitely a move to become a more competitive team.
Yeah.
There wasn't any
But it flatly acknowledges how, in their opinion, how bad the NA competition is. That even playing in competitive games that will have some meaning is so much worse in terms of preparing for Worlds than actually going to Korea and practicing.
Well, the big thing was that they weren't going to be able to play with Seraph, right? So I thought that was their justification. It's it's not necessarily about NA, but it's more about us being able to retain the whole 5 players.
Okay. I mean, that's fine, and I think that's important. We'll see. The proof will be in the pudding. if this is able to play out and they make it to Worlds, then great. And if they don't, then not. It's a giant risk. You're putting yourself out there in a way that you don't have to if you just pick a sub, put Hotshot back in top lane or whatever, and move on.
Yeah. Well, that discussion around whether or not it's unsportsmanlike, also, you know, a lot of people are like, well, this just proves that LCS's format is awful. Of course, all those people are probably avid watchers of Summoning Insight, another show produced by this website. But the big question is, I don't necessarily think that proves that the format is wrong, right? Like, in my opinion, maybe this is fine. Like, okay, let's say it wasn't just CLG deciding this. Maybe a lot of teams decided to do this, and maybe this just became like a thing. Like, let's say we're 3 years away from, 3 years into the future, and this is just like a common thing that happens at the end of the split. Does everyone start being like, oh, this is horrible format, or do they just say like, oh, that's kind of fun, you get to see the subs come in when it doesn't really matter as much?
I think if it was a regular thing, it would be like a significant problem, I think.
Okay.
I think it's tough. Real sports have the same issue. Teams bench their good players towards the end of the season to rest them. They don't send them overseas, so it's not exactly a one-to-one, but it's effectively the same. If you bought tickets to the last week of an NFL game, there's a decent chance that you're going to see subpar competition for one reason or another. And that's not necessarily a weakness of the format. A lot of times at the end of the season, you have really interesting games. We had 5-way ties and near 8-way ties and all kinds of crazy things that the format lends itself towards. You want a marathon, not a sprint, I think, in a regular season. And sometimes marathons are predetermined because you have 2 or 3 people out front and thousands of people way behind. So I do think, though, Riot will have to find a way, if it becomes popular, to shut it down. The NBA struggles with this. The San Antonio Spurs regularly bench their stars in the middle of the season, and they find them in the past. The Riot could think of something similar, a way to find teams for not necessarily putting out their most competitive lineup every time. But we're a little ways away from it being a problem.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting to think about. And again, everybody's drawing, as you said, the analogies to traditional sports, so we'll have to see how that stuff shakes out. What would it look like? Oh, go ahead, Spellsy.
I think even though it happens in traditional sports, I don't think it excuses it really. Like, having non-competitive games is not fun for almost anybody involved, you know?
Now, you say that, but then today we saw an interesting game with, what was it? Jungle Ash and, in the EU LCS, because they were playing a match that did not matter. Do we feel like that's like the same problem, or are we okay with that? It seemed like a lot of people on Twitter were really enjoying that match, and so that's what's confusing to me sometimes.
I think exactly like people leaving the country. If there was too much of it at the end of the season, you'd get sick of it.
Yeah.
And I think this is a danger as we head into potentially a 10-team league. In each of the leagues, you have more teams, a greater chance for more meaningless games at the end of the season. It's all about balance. I think if you keep the ratio of teams to meaningful games correct, you want the right number of meaningful games at the end, then that's fine. Some of this is scheduling. You're playing 5 games in one day. The meaningful games aren't necessarily first or last. They're kind of sprinkled in with the meaningless games. Riot could probably find a way to pack it in a slightly different order so that it doesn't feel as offensive to people. But I think, again, I don't think it's a problem yet. I think it's a nice break to see teams being slightly less serious about the game and pulling out champions or compositions that we don't normally see.
I mean, in my opinion, it's week 11 of the LCS. We've had 10 weeks before this of really impressive play and everybody competing to jostle them to get in the right positions. Right after this week, we've got 2 weeks of playoffs, which are, of course, right before Worlds, some of the most important games that these guys will play the entire year. 2 weeks after that, same with North America. To me, it doesn't seem like the end of the world to have 1 week where you're not going to see the highest level play. I mean, the highest level play, that's true. There are some that it'll happen, but not every team will bring that. And I don't know if that's like the end of the world or even something that a lot of people should be complaining about.
Well, I think what CLG is admitting in this thing is that playoff standing is meaningless. As long as you make the playoffs, it doesn't matter where you end up. And without the concept in sports have of like home field advantage or something like that, it's hard to say what's the difference between 3 and 6. Blue side, red side, we can probably find some statistical arguments. Clearly, they're not too concerned about it. They maybe prefer red side anyway, historically or whatever. So, but I think one way to force this is to make those subtle differences in position, 3 versus 4, 5 versus 6, that kind of stuff matter more. and that could shift the tone of these more meaningless games at the end of the season.
Now, I know we didn't really have this in our notes, but I did want to mention, because we're talking about some of the biggest news from this week, the LMQ stuff. But I want to bring this up in a different context, rather than diving into all of the drama and who said what or whatever. What do you guys think of just the effect that this information has had on the community as a whole? Because it seems like now that we've had so many statements coming out from people are just starting to not care anymore about what actually everyone's saying. All they care about is that the team is okay. Do you think that that's a good sign that everybody's more interested in the team than around the drama around it? Or do you think that people should be paying more attention to like the workings of all these different businesses and organizations behind the scenes? Spellsy, you have any thoughts?
I mean, I think it definitely shows how esports is such a mess, and there's so many different stories, and it's very mismanaged, kind of. So much so that people are now getting bored of the topic, like you said. But I think overall, it's kind of an insight into the behind the scenes, where there's a lot of shady stuff that people just don't find out about.
Yeah.
And here it's kind of being all aired, which is an interesting kind of...
I think the overall arc of the story emphasizes how much esports really is about entertainment. We see that in kind of unofficially and not very talked about, in how much drama people will go over and get into every time. But it's also people connect with the people in esports, the players themselves as people. Without Sharon really early on, and she's had a whole roller coaster of public opinion, and we love her and we hate her and whatever and whatever. And now, people are worried about the players as people, not necessarily their careers as professional athletes or their role or stake in the current standings, but as people who maybe don't deserve this kind of treatment or that kind of thing. I think that speaks to the long-term strength and success of Riot's kind of direction of humanizing and doing all these kind of personal interest stories and that kind of thing. People want to connect with people. They want to connect with streamers that they recognize and identify with and that kind of thing. So this is a people story. The drama in terms of the business side, I think that's why people are getting tired of the story itself. It sort of doesn't matter until, I don't know, something happens maybe. But it's the people. They care about the people. They watch the players. They watch them stream. They care about the people themselves.
So you would say they care about the people. That's
I mean, I care about the people.
Yeah.
I think we should all care about the people.
People are important.
People are fairly important.
Yeah. Spellsy, do you think in your statistical, mathematic, beautiful mind vision of LMQ that this will have some sort of impact on their play in the coming weeks?
I mean, that's not a statistics question.
Yeah, I know, that's why I asked.
But yeah. But I think it might have a slight impact. I mean, game changes matter much more than organizational changes, I think. Like, as long as the players' confidence inside the game is still high, which it has been, they have won 7 out of their last 8 games. I think they'll be doing fine.
So you would say something like this would have a 13.22 repeating chance of affecting them.
Yeah,
it's pretty close.
Yeah, about that.
Close. I mean, we skipped something. So CLG, does it work? Are they going to make Worlds, Travis?
I have no idea. I mean, part of the reason why it's hard to bring that topic up and to have a conversation around it is because it's so up in the air. I mean, the last time there's not a huge set of precedents for teams going to practice someplace else other than before the LCS occurred, and you could argue that at that time teams weren't really efficiently applying stuff that they learned or taking care of their practice or whatever. It's hard for me to see them coming back as this powerhouse, right? They go over there, unknown what teams they're going to scrim, other than supposedly OGN teams. Unknown, how much money's going to be able to help them. It's kind of a strange situation, and you got to wonder if the travel will be impacting them as well.
Yeah.
I still would suspect that if their goal is to have the most amount of practice as a team with Monte Cristo's involvement, including the fact that Seraph has to go back to Korea, this is probably, if that's their goal, this is probably the best way to hit that goal.
Okay, so will they hit the goal?
I mean, that goal of having more training than they win.
Will they make it to Worlds?
Gosh, I don't know. It's really hard to say.
Travis.
No, it's true.
Just make a prediction. I don't know.
Here's why.
CLG,
C9, TSM, and LMQ have been looking quite
Right.
good, but CLG looks like they're on a downward trend. So right now, I would say probably not. Like they don't seem like they're going to Worlds. Like this is what I tweeted after last week is like LMQ, TSM, C9 look like they're not going to be having too many other teams take games off of them. This as opposed to what we saw early on in the split. I would not at this point predict CLG going to Worlds.
It's
Unknown
crazy
what
how
Korea will do.
Yeah, I mean, you've seen TSM with a roster swap, LMQ with all this ownership drama, CLG going overseas for a while.
Yes.
Who knows what all of this ends up
Yeah.
being? Cloud9, one of the more unstable teams so far of those top four, maybe suddenly the most stable team in NA right now,
Yeah.
and might be able to just cruise on in with least amount of drama somehow.
I mean, it wouldn't surprise me. C9 is the team that'll just show up, and like last year at PAX, everybody expected the really hype finals between TSM and C9, and the C9 just kind of spanked TSM.
Not so high. Okay, so you're saying CLG no? That was official prediction. CLG no.
As much as a prediction is
That's
worthwhile
fine.
at
We're
this
putting you
point.
on the record,
All right.
Spellsy.
So I think with the whole CLG thing going to Korea, I think like the conclusion is that it's only good because Seraph had to go anyway.
Yeah.
I think it might actually have a negative impact on them. I know like from when I was a player, and when you face opponents like that are way better than you, let's say that the Korean teams are way better than them, it really kind of uproots your confidence in the game. Like so much of League of Legends is based on feeling and intuition, and you kind of develop a way to play that you don't think about it from moment to moment. And so when you play against these Korean teams and if you get smashed over and over again, you start to like supremely doubt your intuition and your moment to moment gameplay, and that can really hurt you as a team.
Yeah.
And so I think that it has a chance of like backfiring big time.
One thing I do want to add here is that CLG has been somewhat vocal about the fact that as a team they've been missing a lot of cohesion, I guess, even outside of the game. And obviously a lot of people have talked about how C9 or this like group
Right,
of friends and they all
sure.
sort of work together, right?
Yeah.
And Link had said that he was really disappointed that they didn't have like a coach in the house. So, part of the other factor here might be having Monte Cristo there to just like smack him around. a
Yeah,
little
I
bit.
mean, my guess would be it's net positive,
Yeah.
especially because they were going to be missing Seraph anyway, but probably not enough still.
So you don't think they're going to go to Worlds?
I don't think they'll go to Worlds. I mean, of course, we'll never know whether this was better or worse than them being. I do think this is better than Seraph going away and them training without him
Right.
somehow. But no, if I had to predict, I don't think they're going to Worlds.
Well,
I think
We'll find out.
I haven't given my prediction, so I think my prediction is I think C9 and LMQ are looking like the favorites right now, and then it comes down to TSM and C9 and CLG.
which is such a hype situation, right?
Yeah.
And I kind of think that CLG would beat TSM. I don't know. I've just had like a feeling.
I mean, they lost
this
last
split.
time, right? Like,
But
this
that might
last-
not even
last
happen. I
weekend.
mean, the issue with the playoff structure is they
Yeah,
get somebody
yeah,
else.
yeah.
They get LMQ in the first round because they fall to sixth. Boom, done. See you later.
Yeah. Well,
Well, that can't happen, but yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But whatever,
No,
right?
it's,
Like,
it's
the way
all
it
about the
seems to.
structure.
It's all about the structure. This is why giving up control of where you are in the standings is risky.
Yeah,
You might
that's
want to pick
definitely
your
risky.
matchup in the first round. We've certainly seen that before. Teams trading up or down to avoid Cloud9 a year ago.
yeah. Either way, we'll just have to see. Big question is, am I going to be able to interview all three teams at Worlds or not? And we'll have to see how that plays out. Moving on, we've got Gnar, who is, I don't know, he's
Gnar.
on the PBE now. and
I
people are
love
looking out.
Gnar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why do you love Gnar?
No, I think Gnar is extremely cute. I care about like immersion. I love his sort of his nonsensical talk and his boomerang and his jumping around and stuff. I'm not a fan of Mega Gnar at all. I would prefer that he was just Mini Gnar.
Gnar.
I've been joking about creating an account only Mini Gnar where I never let Gnar transform during games. I stay in Mini Gnar. That
I
would be
thought you
difficult.
can't. I thought it just happened.
Yeah, you just let his rage cool down some. It's,
Okay.
it's not a very effective way to play. I don't expect
Yeah.
to be making Challenger as only mini Gnar, but I like Gnar, basic Gnar a lot. He seems extremely attractive and fun to play.
Yeah.
Attractive.
Yeah.
That's how you describe
His
it.
model
he's
is
super cute.
so cute. Yeah.
So cute. Yeah.
Spellsy, When you look at him and you see like the numbers just all over his body, sort of like
Yeah.
Neo in the Matrix.
Yeah.
What does that mean? It's like a 5'7.6"
Yeah.
repeating.
So when I look at him, all I think is like, have you seen those ears and then his little tail and then his boomerang?
Yeah.
He's so cute.
So
like
good.
it's like, and then when you hear his voiceover, and then he doesn't make any like words, he just makes little sounds.
Yeah.
It's
So
so
it like
cute.
breaks your robot heart, is
Yeah.
what you're saying.
Yeah.
I mean, I love the look. I think the danger is I'm really worried that I'm not going to enjoy playing him, and I will buy the skin pack because Gnar also looks adorable, and then I'll hate playing him and I'll never play him. I'm more
why are
hopeful
you
than I was
concerned
with
about
Zac
that?
because I loved all of the Zac lead up, and then he turned out to be this blobby humanoid shape, and that was extremely disappointing. When the little lead up, the comic book where you see the tiny little prehistoric yordles or whatever, and you're like, I like that little guy, and then he bursts out of the ice into this big guy. I'm like, oh my god, what is this? I don't want a big guy. I just want the little guy. The little guy. So, but I think they have all the same challenges that they do when they kind of overwork champions, and that he has two forms, ranged and melee like Quinn. That didn't work out too well. It's tough to balance. You have the ranged form that is squishy, and then the tanky melee form. So you either get damage and free tankiness, or you have to build tankiness and then you don't have any damage. He looks like a balancing nightmare for Riot, and that makes me very nervous, where you love the champion,
Yeah.
but then they're Quinn top lane, and they suck, and you never play them.
How did
I
you
think-
pronounce melee?
Melee.
Okay, sounded like you said melee.
Melee?
Yeah, which is funny because you can't pronounce your last name. Spellsy, you were gonna say.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, see, I think the one issue about the balance is, I mean, like his kit, as he said, was like definitely like kind of overloaded. Like they put a ton of different utility and all that kind of stuff into his kit. But see, I think their overall goal when they were creating this was to create a transformed champion that has balanced melee and range changes.
I mean, I would hope they would say that about every transformed champion. Like if they set out, we want to create an unbalanced champion that dominates play and is instantly banned all the time, that would be a bad goal. Like, yeah, I would hope that it's balanced. What about, I mean, this is like Elise got free tank stats in spider form. They had to take those away. It was too powerful. Jace got free tank stats in hammer form. They had to take that away. This is the same thing. He has free tank stats in melee form. If it's too much, then he's too strong. If it's not enough, then he just blows up. And because you're even in less control, they have to like keep his tank form strong because you're forced into it all the time, which means they'll have to nerf his ranged form. Then you just do any damage, and now you're just a tanky top laner with like a crappy ranged form until you can force yourself into melee and beat on stuff. So I just think they like all of these kind of paradigms just create tension in the design that makes me nervous.
No, there's definitely tension, and I mean, I think it'll be hard to pull off, and I think, of course, he will not be balanced. But I think he has the potential to, because of how you can't control his ranged form and his melee form.
I just
The
think
problem is his
items.
items. The problem is his items.
Okay, that's the same problem that Quinn has, right? Where
you can't build range DPS or whatever, you can't build like Infinity Edge or anything, because then you
need Frozen Mallet to be a good item.
Yeah,
That's what you need.
yeah.
Because he already has health scaling anyway, and you want 80 damage and tankiness somehow, and that item sucks, and you can't build it and
That
there's
item
no efficient
sucks.
way to do it. So you're just like, I don't know. It's the same problem. It's like Teemo, Quinn, it's just a mess. Nidalee. Mess.
Teemo, Quinn, Nidalee.
Nobody there is representing like a well-balanced champion that people enjoy either to play against or to play. So
it's interesting to think about. I do like the fact that when I look at him and some of the abilities and that kind of thing, he does remind me more of their new approach to designing champions, which are make them really fun and unique. I feel like back in the day you saw a lot of champions that felt a lot like another champion or something along those lines, and this feels a lot more along those lines of like a Thresh, for instance, where it'll be either really cool and fun to watch, or obviously like it's a higher risk where maybe we won't see him play.
I went into this once we saw the comic book saying two things. One, I hope his ultimate is like a Rumble thing where you have to kind of pick your timing to go into it. And two, I hope he's not a ranged melee form like Quinn. And I got both at the same time. So I do think he's a nice, unique mix of things. And I think the building up and timing your transformation will be a key and fun part of playing it. So that all seems like a success. Whether it's balanceable or not, we'll find out.
Spellsy, is he going to be good? You're a retared pro player.
I mean, it's hard to tell because I literally haven't looked at the numbers at all.
Make a prediction. Apparently, this show is just about making predictions.
I think he will be pretty good.
So he'll be competitive. LCS.
Yes.
You think so?
Is it a he
I don't
or is
think
it a
so.
she?
It's a
It's
he.
a he. I don't.
think he
I
would be.
think this is the exact type of champion that they. If he's competitive, it's because he's overpowered, not because he's balanced.
Any
Yeah.
champion, Spellsy,
Yeah.
that you could compare him to in terms of like, maybe not play style, but like that slot or role?
I mean, I think he really is similar to the new Nidalee.
Okay.
I think the new Nidalee will have a similar build path and kind of has a similar role of going in and out at the same, with like melee and range swarm. I think when I saw like 5 minutes of him on stream, that's what he seemed a lot like.
Okay.
And they may decide ultimately that he has to play high damage and low tankiness and strip all that tankiness out. But in theory, he gets to be a tank where Nidalee doesn't.
Yeah. Yeah, he's more tanky than Nidalee.
We'll see.
Very good. Well, I can't think of anything, unless you guys can think of any pressing, urgent things that you've thought about over the past week.
No.
League of Legends. So I think that this probably wraps up this episode of whatever this show is. Spellsy, thank you so much. You do stat
Thank you.
stuff, right? I know. It never Reddit doesn't care, but
Travis doesn't read the
you do
site. That's what
stats.
you're learning.
You want to
Yeah.
talk about where people can find your stat stuff or what you do?
I mean, there's a small site I think that you can find it on. It's ongamers.com.
.com.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's always on.
And
Right.
Twitter is good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can find my Twitter at
ongamers.com.
SpellsyLOL.
They do the Korean broadcast of that tournament, right?
OGN.
Yeah.
That's also what they're known as.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, and Hunter, you do not
My
produce any
work
content.
is indirect. You
Yeah.
cannot follow me in any way whatsoever.
Well, but people who have problems with our video players or anything like that
can tweet at
find
me
you
at Hunter B. Leigh.
Yes, with
Leigh.
Leigh.
Leigh,
Yes.
yes.
So if you have any issues with onGamers, you feel that any of the employees have acted inappropriately, or
Right.
any number of different things, you can contact him there.
That's the best
Our
way.
video producers, by the way, you guys never hear about them, but they're crazy people.
Crazy.
As always, you can find me on Twitter at SOTLTravis. I produce content at the LCS every week. I'm beginning going up to PAX for playoffs and then off to Worlds and covering all sorts of different stuff there. So, for everyone here on this couch, these other two people, I'd like to thank you for joining us. And you can check out more of our content at ongamers.com.